This Capital Investments. Would you like to? Thank you very much. Thank you. And we're also joined by Edward Talmorgera. He's the CEO of NewVest. Gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us.
For taking up on board.
Noman, we're going to start with you. I think it's nice to take a concrete example of somewhere that you can invest in water infrastructure. And luckily, we have you with us today. You've got some experience of this. You invested in the clean water project in Malawi, I believe. So tell us about your experience. What went wrong there? What went right? What did you learn from that experience? And what were the returns to you as investors?
Well, thank you so much for taking me on board over here. It was 2017. We started the project in Malawi, which is called Lilongwe, the capital of Malawi. We invested about $200 million to raise to bring the clean water from the Nasima Lake, which is a landlocked lake surrounded by the 5 countries, to bring the clean water from 200 kilometers away from Nasima to the Lilongwe. Everything was fine. We did a JV for the Jeopardy Printers Group from Geneva, and also Pegasus Capital Investments, and raised a $200 million with that. Working in African continents is amazing because God has gifted them a lot. There's a massive commodities, a lot of opportunity for the businesses. But there is a slight problem with that dealing with the bureaucracy is pretty hard out there. And when we did the funding, the things were committed to us and couldn't make it happen. But what we had to do, we signed an agreement for 26 years, and then we had to end up and get out of there in just 4 years' time. But we lost a lot of money out of it, but lesson learned and moved on. It was a good thing that we were getting the humanitarian ground, that people will start getting the clean water along with the investment. Of course, the commercial interest was there. But when the people started getting benefits out of it, another political party were getting against it. So we had to just move out. Otherwise, we were going to be crushed. So
Gosh.
it was a horrible part, but the best part was that people were pretty happy with it.
But that sounds like it was a difficult investment environment to get this to work. Would you try it again somewhere else, or I mean, would you go back to Lilongwe?
Not into the water anymore, but more into the digital assets like carbonization, digitalization, and the water infrastructure. The people who are buying the water, consume the water, and they can do the investment in the digital asset by the water usage.
Right, so slightly more control there, and not getting caught up in that bureaucracy.
Ex-investment banker, my strategy is always, wherever we are putting in the money, ensuring that our capital is protected somehow. Once the capital is protected, then we go for capital appreciation and ROI things.
Well, Edward, just to turn to you now, we've heard that how difficult it can be to make direct investments into water infrastructure. But there are indeed lots of dedicated infrastructure funds in the world. You hear about a new one almost every day. They were a real flavor of the month at one point. Just how much of the overall infrastructure wallet, if you like, is actually invested in water?
So, pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me with you. And I would say we tried to do a bit of internal research on that very question ahead of this panel. And just to put it in context, we only have a part of the investment landscape. We created the world's first passive index funds for private equity funds, then private debt funds, and now for private infrastructure funds. So when you talk about infrastructure investing and that question, obviously the land of infrastructure investment covers a lot of different ways of investing on equities and credit, public and private. So within the world of private infrastructure investing, we estimated on a look-through basis that it's no more than about 10% only of the capital that's being invested into water. There are some funds that have a bit more of a specialization, and then it's more of the multi-billion funds. There isn't any one that is pure just water. The pure just water tend to be more water tech and more innovation than smaller funds. But of the multi-billion-dollar private infrastructure funds, many of them do have a focus on water as a sector in the different aspects that were mentioned here, but it still doesn't amount in aggregate to more than about 10%.
is fascinating because we obviously all take water for granted. We use it all the time. It's kind of shocking to hear that actually so little of the private infrastructure equity is in water. I mean, you said there that some of these funds are more specialized. They might have a bit of a water, but why do you think it is that so little money has actually gone to this sector? Is it that the returns aren't very good? I mean, why is it not migrating there?
So the beauty of what again we do is not having to try and assess the um, particular investment strategy of any one fund and how they approach to it to say which is going to be the best risk-adjusted returns. Now, problem is when I've heard these funds pitch and they would talk about water as a sector, etc. I'm kind of easy, so I kind of fall in love with all of those GPs and they sell very well. So I went to buy all of them, which is kind of what we did as an approach, and then let them find those opportunities. With that said, I think that there is, within the world of private infrastructure, they are looking for a level of relatively high returns. Those infrastructure funds, those private infrastructure funds, do need a gross level of return, which is in the teens or more, typically. And perhaps in those big water sectors with a lot of regulation, there aren't as many opportunities to achieve those kind of level of returns. So you really have to pick right. And if you get it right, there have been some phenomenally successful investments, but there have also been some cases where those investments did not work out well. And so again, it brings us back to an approach of diversification being your only free lunch in investment world. When it comes to water investing and more broadly as part of that infrastructure, it's what we believe in and try to make available. So, very happy for them to keep on investing into water as a part of overall infrastructure, and we'll happily have exposure to that.
Good to know. We are very reliant on desalinated water in the Gulf, Thomas. We touched on that earlier. Um, and although it's meant that we can all live here, and I'm sure we're all very grateful to desalinated water. I know I'm happy not to be bathing in the sea every morning. That does have some environmental challenges, doesn't it? The desalination process and the infrastructure needed for desalination can create its own environmental issues. What kind of problems do they cause?
Well, the GCC, I think, is running maybe 95% or higher on desalination. The cons of desalination are very high capex, very high opex. It takes forever to get a desalination plant approved, permitted online. Then you have the environmental concerns, which is, when you discharge the brine, which is the excess salt back into the ocean, the salinity increases and you're destroying basically a marine life, in proximity of the coast. The other challenge too, and that comes now more to human consumption, is that water is pretty much dead water. It's being run through reverse osmosis, and in some cases of the water that you're drinking here, there's some minerals added back to that, but nevertheless, it's pretty much dead water, and it's so-called macroclustered. That means it cannot penetrate your cells, so your cells are not getting hydrated. And some doctors and scientists say basically we're not dying and becoming sick because of age, but because of lack of hydration. So hydration is very, very important. And also, for the ladies in the room, you probably experienced having been for extended period of time with the GCC and showering and using the water that there can be hair loss. The skin is being affected. So it's just not an ideal solution. It's better, obviously, than no water, but it's really, really important to look at alternatives.
What are the alternatives, though? I mean, I'm getting thirsty just thinking about this, but what are the alternatives to desalinated water for us here?
Well, the best alternative for human consumption, for drinking use, which is the highest use, actually, it's sitting on your table. It's IRA water. I was privileged to sponsor the water. The CFO of IRA sits there in the back, Mr. Razwan, and this is water from Norway, which is extremely pure. And it's imported. So one of the options is to import water specifically for drinking consumption. The other option is to also collect rainwater. There's atmospheric water generation back in, thousands of years ago in Egypt. They basically had already atmospheric water generation. So they had certain leaves that they were setting up at nighttime. And then the mist was running down the palm leaves into certain contraptions that was collecting the water. So that can be done on a large scale, and there's some atmospheric water generation project here as well. Very, very important is also to reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's the most important part. So all the gray water needs to be reused and recycled. And then obviously when you have these large water events, which we had on April 16th of last year, the water needs to be collected. If it's not collected, then it runs off into the ocean, or it builds in large ponds where it's basically rotting water because the water's not moving. You have mosquito issues and everything. So there are a lot of different options. I haven't been long enough in the GCC. I don't know how many aquifers there's still here that are unexplored, but groundwater is obviously the best option in terms of fresh drinking water.
I was just thinking there when you were talking about the reusing of water. If any of you have ever been to London, you may have been surprised by the delightful statistic that the water that we drink in London has been through somebody's body 7 times before it gets to you, which I always relished. So that's very interesting. I mean, obviously, this is a difficult theme to invest in, Edward. I mean, we've gone through some of the problems. Obviously, it's vital, but it's clearly a tricky one to invest in. Usually, we want to be able to benchmark the performances of our investments. Is there any way we can do that with investments in water? Is there any tools that we can have to see how we're doing?
Again, I think with benchmarking and it's a subject that's very close to my heart academically. It's about finding the right appropriate benchmark. So it may well be in the equities world, the indices that are being now published and discussed already. In the world of private markets, purely just benchmarking water investments, I'd say today is practically impossible. But now that we have a lot more of this data of private market investments into the sector, we'll be able to provide such benchmarking and truly say what are the sort of over time trends as well as results post-ante. It's a backwards looking thing in private markets. It takes a bit more time to, once you had those investments, grow them, nurture them, create the value and exit them. And then in hindsight, be able to sort of say, which were the better investments and which were the worst, in our language, sort of who are the top quartile managers who invested them and so forth. And the key thing that we drive at the moment over the last 3 years when investing in private markets is the appreciation at the fund level, that it's really about looking at quartiles and what we call the pool return, the weighted average being the true index of an asset class, as opposed to the median return, which is what so far most investors have used as a benchmark. And when you look at a lot of the fund of funds who have been the promoters of that and the education of that to allocators, they've shown very well that they've done, net of their fees, of course, more often than not, they claim better than that median level return. And we've been out there poking the bear a little bit by saying that's not really good enough. You want to show that net of your fees, more often than not, you are beating the pooled return. And that's a higher benchmark to set, because historically in private markets, that pooled return has done way better than the median. It's very much like in most other asset classes in public markets, which is why those index approaches have done so well in recent years. You have those outliers that have done phenomenally well. And those outliers, that we here, I'm sure, sort of can relate. It was NVIDIA last year, and it was Zoom 3 years ago, and it was Shell 6 years ago. It's those outliers that bring the average up. And so, if you've picked right, if you picked those outlier winners in your investment portfolio, you have achieved phenomenal alpha. But if you missed out on those, your portfolio is more likely not to lag that index level return. And so I would sort of challenge everyone to accept that the index return, the pooled return, the weighted average of an asset class is really your benchmark. And you can do so on private infrastructure funds as a whole, private equity as a whole, or you can drill down and say water investments specifically and treat those as the asset class benchmark. But they would complement that private to the public side, which is obviously in terms of dollars being deployed substantially more than what you're having deployed in the private markets at the moment.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, if I could add something to that as well. So one of the challenges in myself, starting 12 years ago to pioneer water as an asset class, is that you cannot compare water to copper or to oil or to gold or to LNG. because water is a human right per the United Nations 2015 was established as a human right. So when you deal with water, integrity, stewardship, custody are of utmost crucial importance. And that in itself might be a little, contradiction with global capital markets who always put money first. But when you work with water, you have to follow the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit in that order. First you put the people, then you put the planet, and then the profit follows, which again is real sustainability, patient capital, long term. So that's really one of the challenges. The other challenge is that when you deal in water, with water, you're always dealing with public entities and public utilities. Just quickly want to touch upon one bad use case, which is Thames Water. So when the Thatcher administration privatized the UK water industry, we see what happens, right? And now you have basically a distressed, defunct corporate where there is corruption on the inside with Thames Water, there's corruption on the outside, and the victims are basically the British people. They're not getting their water, at the price they should. There's leakage problems, there's pollution problems, and that happens when greed comes in. And you have to keep greed away from water. Very, very important. Water needs to be pure, as it's described in the Bible and also in the Holy Quran.
So and I'd like to come back to the ESG pushback actually with you later on, because obviously some of the principles that you've outlined there have come under some fire in recent months since the Trump came back into our orbit. There's been a lot of pushback against the idea of ESG, DEI, other acronyms. So we should come back to that. But Noman, we've talked about equities, or direct investment. But how about debt? I mean, what if I'm a person who prefers credit? Can I lend to water infrastructures? I mean, is there any opportunity for me there? Anything in Sukuk options for investing in this theme?
Well, as of now, there are very few companies that are doing these kind of debt investment to the infrastructure. Mostly, unfortunately, water industry has become very much commercialized. The people are looking to the investment in the water industry only for business and not for humanitarian grounds. If anybody is looking for kind of investment in water security, this kind of thing, so everybody looks at the face of the United Nations that they will be funding the water security products. And thanks to the Donald Trump and their things, they are going to tokenize the assets. They are working on it. And I believe, as we have already done the electricity tokenization in Croatia and working in Saudi market as well, tokenization of electricity, they might propose to one of our family office to build the tokenization of water supply. So like anybody is consuming the electricity, they are buying unit to consume the electricity. So unit is a unit for them. For us, they are buying our token, which is backed by real electricity.
Hmm.
So these are the same formula we'll adopt and integrate in water supply. Anybody is paying the bill, utility bill for the water usage monthly, they will buy the token backed by real water, and it will be commercialized completely, and their pool will be under regulatory authorities of a particular country.
Interesting. So instead of going the debt route, maybe it's the crypto route.
Yes,
Uh,
there is a world going on.
yeah. All right. I mean, you mentioned there, Noman, that the commercialization of utilities. Obviously, this has been a long story. We still have a lot of state-owned utility assets. You have privately backed ones as well. But perhaps when it comes to investing in water, Thomas, it's actually states and sovereign wealth funds who ought to be taking the lead, maybe. Do you see concrete interest from sovereign wealth funds in this region in investing in water infrastructure?
Well,
And sorry, this one's to Thomas.
in this region,
Okay.
now in the coming year, there will be more rain, like last year we see. So, and it will be happening further. But this region, they will be building more of the dams to restore the water, like China and India, Pakistan. They've been building a lot of dams from last 40 years. And it is a saying, a very old saying in our region, that the third war will be on the water security.
Right. Yeah.
So they've been building it, and in Saudi Arabia they are building one dam already on water security to restore the rainwater. In UAE we have Hatta Dam. Though it's pretty, inside they are pretty small dams, but they are building it, meaning they are working on the already water security.
And in the wider region as well, the water wars are certainly an issue. But on the sovereign wealth funds, Thomas, did you see any that are interested?
Well, to answer your question, I just arrived basically a year ago. I'm setting up a shop now at ADGM. And then obviously the first task of business is, to approach the sovereign wealth funds, which I believe will be interested, if there's a solid business investment case. And again, using, speaking about a use case, Qatar is at the moment the champion in GCC when it comes to water security. It's the only nation in the world that has built 15 water security mega reservoirs, which gives the Qatari people a 7-day runway in case there's an emergency. So they're really leading the charge. And just behind that is KSA. So MBS and its administration have put many programs now in place, initiatives to become basically a global leader on water security. And then also we have the UAE as well, but at the moment it's Qatar and KSA in the lead.
Certainly, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed here has talked about water security in the region a lot. This is certainly one of his big themes and something he looks at. And we have got, of course, DEWA in Dubai in terms of the listed securities in utilities. And here we have Taqa, who has invested a lot in water infrastructure too. Let's pretend that I'm an investor now. This is Cornish Capital speaking to you. I am actually finding this water theme quite scary. I'm feeling like it might be a bit risky. Can you help me, Edward? Can you help me spread some of my risk in water? I mean, is there anything that I could invest in that would be a bit less risky? But I want to play this theme, but I want to do it in a less risky way. For Edward, sorry.
I'll tee it up for you. No. My answer would be, it's a optimal portfolio construction can come from a core satellite approach. So you anchor an exposure with good deployment, low risk, well diversified, sleep well at night in an index kind of approach that gives you some exposure to water amongst many other different things. But in doing so very efficiently, you free up resources of human capital, of financial resources, to spend the necessary effort and time and real diligence to pick out what Thomas is going to tell you in a moment is the ways to invest in the areas where you have the highest possible conviction for real alpha generating, but with the necessary, to your point, very important mitigating factors to protect as much as you can and preserve capital. And that requires a lot of effort to make those investments right. And given there's so many different opportunities and so many different things that you at Cornish Capital and others would need to be looking at, resources are always the number one thing that is constrained, one way or another. If it is the capital available, if it's the human resources available, time that we all have to sort of battle with. And so, my solution to you would be, here's the way, just buy the index for now. Obviously, I'm a self-interested person to promote that, but we believe in that, a well-diversified approach of investing into private capital delivers that very well-diversified, risk-adjusted return with the sleep well at night kind of approach. But all that is so that you can really, alongside the core, have the satellite and then do the work and find the best opportunities in water and do the necessary diligence and structuring and everything else to have, at the end of the day, your overall portfolio do best. And with that, I'm also happy to sort of pick it up from there. Where's the alpha generating opportunity?
Well, my recommendation for Cornish Capital would be 3 opportunities to allocate. First would be in a fund that invests in global equity, which I mentioned is highly liquid. So I think that's risk mitigated. Secondly, would be in a private fund that invests in special situations, such, for example, Thames Water or buying water rights. In this case, also Project Greenland, which is one of my projects where I'm acquiring next week rights to freshwater exploration rights from the Greenland government for 7 trillion liters per year for 20 years. And then lastly, Sheikh Mohammed, tokenization. That's another project we're working on, tokenizing actually the underlying asset of the Greenland freshwater exploration rights. And I think that's where we're heading to. There's already a lot of real assets tokenization, and if you have a very strong underlying, such as it's been done with gold already or with water, then I think you have a very solid investment proposition. And also it helps to democratize not only finance, but also, the asset of water.
Who are you talking to in Greenland? Are you talking to the White House, or are you still talking to Greenland itself? Denmark, are they involved?
Well, I started Project Greenland in 2021. Now I have to calculate. President Trump's first period was probably just before that, but he mentioned at that time that he wanted to buy Greenland.
Ah,
So it just happened to be now with his second term that he's, I think, very serious. But we're actually talking directly to the private companies that acquired freshwater. Sorry.
thank you.
We're actually. Can you hear me now? Better now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're talking actually to the private companies who acquired the freshwater exploration rights from the government of Greenland. So it's Greenland started in 2015 a so-called water and ice for export program, because they realized that they have most of the fresh water on Earth, aside from the Amazon jungle in Brazil, and they didn't know how to monetize it, so they mandated PwC to do some benchmark studies, a tax framework, and then they did a tender, and there were roughly 10 to 11 companies buying that license, and most of them weren't able in the meantime to come up with funding and infrastructure, et cetera, but we picked two of the licensees that we think are most promising, and that's basically how we're buying ourselves into these freshwater exploration rights. It's similar to what Saudi Arabia did a long time ago when they discovered oil and were monetizing, commercializing oil.
Fascinating. So water is the new oil, potentially.
We have to be very careful with that. Again, that's kind of like the mainstream narrative. Water is the new gold. Water is the new oil. But again, I have to caution, because water is a human right. So we have to be very, very careful. It is a resource, but it's needed for human consumption. So again, it takes a lot of integrity and stewardship to treat it right and to be successful, monetizing it.
No, and I want to come to you. This is, again, a bit of a Donald Trump themed question. I think a lot of questions today have that overtone or undertone. The rise of the right in the US and other parts of the world have led to a bit of a pushback on ESG principles that have been a focus for investors for quite some time. Your fund has ESG as quite a central theme, I believe. Does this shift in the narrative, in the political environment, lead you to look at things differently on the ESG front?
It does actually, because when you see the commercialization, particularly with any regulatory authorities, then we consider the political background as well. Like I say, water would happen with us in Malawi. Similarly, if we are going to any investment with any government entities, we're ensuring that their interest is taken care on a longer run. The contract we have done in the solar power project in Croatia, we did the 26 years contract for the secure lending, secure investment, so that if the political any changes happens, it doesn't give us a bad impact to the business and investment.
So the change in... go ahead, Ed.
I just had a further thought here. I imagine that, given everything we've said, everyone will appreciate that water is very tied to political considerations everywhere in the world. And so change in political tides are going to influence the sector and then the investment landscape. Yeah, a thought that sort of maybe the contra to that and to everything we've talked about so far, but still relates to water to add to the mix here, is water tech. So if you look at the sort of more on the venture capital side that is focused on investments that relate to water, I would sort of venture that they would be sort of very uncorrelated to the investments across the big infrastructure of water and the other things we've talked about. They have room for real alpha, as well as being sort of protected from changing views towards ESG and political landscape.
That's interesting. And good. Well, I don't want to ignore our lovely audience. We'd like to take any questions now, if you have any for the panel. There are people with microphones lurking at the back. They're going to roam around the room. Does anyone have any questions for Thomas, for Sheikh Mohammed Noman? We've got a hand over there. If we could have a microphone, please, that'd be great. Or maybe I can bring you one from here. I could throw one to you like a a baton. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is more of an observation actually than a question. It's probably not directly related to asset management either, but I would say that it need a mandate from the federal government. Once that mandate is made, and you mentioned that Sheikh Mohammed has been talking about water conservation, scarcity, but I think it needs the federal government to mandate water conservation
Absolutely.
amongst federal government is, and even, dare I say it, put up the cost of water to the population.
Yeah, no, I agree. It basically needs two actions. First of all, it needs to be mandated, and I think that it can be done very well in the GCC, the way the different jurisdictions are set up in terms of the administration. Second of all, it requires all of us to realize, to basically elevate our awareness and consciousness, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's really where it starts. And I think the combination of that, to mandate it, enforce it, and then obviously, the public complying with it is key. There's another poster boy, which is Israel. Israel used to be a desert nation. They turned themselves around from a huge deficit of water to have access, which they imported also in the neighboring regions. And I was fortunate enough to speak at a conference many years ago about Israel, because the Israeli ambassador in the US was not available, and I learned about Israel. Israel really start teaching their kids already in kindergarten, in school, to be good water stewards. They consider themselves water citizens. They also have very strong compliance. They've been leading on irrigation. They invented basically drip irrigation, which was then implemented also in the US. They're huge on water conservation. So it takes a combined, concerted effort of all the stakeholders involved. But yes, the government is responsible and needs to be held accountable for, best water stewardship. And that not only concerns water, that is also energy. That is, for example, plastic, which we have a huge issue here in the UAE, starting with plastic bags, plastic straws, all that type of stuff. Has to come from the top. But I think Sheikh Mohammed is on a very good path, and hopefully have a chance to meet him in person soon and inspire him to some accelerated action.
There is a sorry. Yeah. I've been to Japan once, and I was very surprised to see that toilet system. I mean, they're very less water is fly. The rest is the filtered, and they do uses technology. So the way you say rightly that flush is a massive amount of water being flushed out, and then they are using the technology to reuse it. It's better to have initial state to use the minimum water so that you can utilize the maximum level for the people to drink it at least.
So there are ways around it. Do we have any other questions from the audience at all? Any hands? No one. Oh, yep. Yes, please. I just feel like we should have some sort of music that goes on now.
Is this working?
Yes.
Hi, it's Imogen from Zaria here. I just wanted to quickly ask Thomas if you could speak a little bit more about your London ETF that you mentioned briefly. If you could just expand a tiny bit on that.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to make it very short. I don't want to take up all the space here. So we developed an equity index, and then we discussed with certain issuers to launch an ETP, and basically an ETF, exchange traded product. We had lengthy discussions with Fidelity. They were very interested, and we were ready to launch, but then they had some internal personal changes, so that kind of fell out the window. And now we're looking at Han ETF, which is the only white label platform, and need to finalize the final global index with Morningstar, and then we're planning to launch out of most likely Ireland Exchange, UK. I also have to give some kudos to London. London is really also leading with Luxembourg in terms of sustainable finance, responsible investing. So it's a very good, I think, ground to launch such an initiative.
Any more? We've got 1 more minute. This please, gentleman in the grey, thank you.
Hi, I'll also keep this short. I'm an accountant, so I like profit. But also my dad lives in the south of England, so he has dealt with some of the issues there with the water company. Really, it's really a question to Thomas. Just what safeguards need to be in place to ensure that it's more people and planet rather than profit.
South of England, you probably talk about Southern Water. They also have their challenges. So let's speak about Thames and Southern Water, or all the water utilities. They need to be under public oversight again. And Ofwat is not good enough. Ofwat is the agency in the UK that kind of like supervises, or is kind of like the watchdog. But it needs to be under public supervision, with strong integrity and strong guardrails. And basically, the whole process needs to be reversed. You probably know that Macquarie, one of the large infrastructure investors, they just basically exploited Thames over the years, with dividend payments and leveraging the debt. That cannot be. So there needs to be very, very strong enforcement and very clear rules to make sure that the British people have a long-term sustainable water supply.
Thank you for all those questions. That's all we've got time for today. Just leaves me to thank the panelists for a really interesting discussion. I've certainly never thought about water from quite so many angles. We didn't get to snow. That's maybe the only one we missed. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. It's a break now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.